So I'm going to show you how you can clear the fractions and decimals from an equation so that you have an easier equation to solve. So let's start with clearing the decimals. So for example 1, let's say we had 5.8n plus 1.5 equals 3.2 plus 4.1n. All right, so for this equation, we would be solving for n. And while you could absolutely solve this equation as is, clearing the decimals would make a similar equation that you could solve without having the decimals in the solving steps. All you need to do is look at how many decimal places there are. There's 1, there's 1, there's 1, and there's 1. So basically what we're going to do is multiply this whole equation by 10, which means that we're going to move the decimal one place on every single term in the equation. So what we would end up with is 58n plus 15 equals 32 plus 41n. And now this would be a much easier equation, especially if you do not like decimals. So from here, you would just go through the steps to solve for n. So just for time, I don't know that we need to go through the steps for solving. So let's just practice clearing the decimals to solve. So for second example, maybe you have 3.7x minus 5 equals 2.1x minus 0.9. All right, so again, what you're going to do is you're going to look. I have one decimal there. This would be like 0.0. There's one decimal there and one decimal there. So there is a decimal here, but we don't have any after it. So we could, again, multiply this whole equation by 10, which would move that over 1, that over 1, that over 1, and that over 1. So our equation would be 37x minus 50 equals 21x minus 9. And then you could go through the steps to solve from there. Let's look at one more decimal one. So for this example, let's say at 1.05 plus 3x equals 2.1x minus 6.4. All right, so again, we're going to look and check the decimals. So we have two decimals here. This one doesn't have any, this one has 1, and this one has 1. So what we want to do is we want to move this one 2 places over. So basically what we're doing on this equation is multiplying by 100. So that we'll go 2 spaces there, which means we would have to go 2 spaces, 2 spaces, and 2 spaces. So we would end up with 105 plus 300x equals 210x minus 640. So from here, you could go through and do the steps to solving. You don't have to do anything with your answer because as long as you change everybody by the same amount, your answer will still be the same. All right, so let's take a look at clearing the fractions. All right, clearing the fractions is similar, except our problems have fractions in them. But again, I think most of you would prefer to solve an equation that didn't have a fraction in it. So let's say we had 2/3 x minus 4 equals 1/2 x plus 3/4. All right, so when we look at this, we're going to scope out our denominators here. This would be over 1. All right, but if you look at it, in clearing the fractions, what we're going to do is we're actually going to get a common denominator. So what we want to do is look at all of these 4 fractions and figure out what would the common denominator be. Hopefully you come up with 12. So what we want to do is rewrite this so that we have 12 as the denominator for each one. All right, so to get this to become 12, we multiply by 4. So this is going to be 8 over 12x, and then minus. This one we would need to multiply by 12. So this will be 48 over 12. To get 2 to become 12, we need to multiply by 6, which makes this 6 over 12x. And then this one would need to be multiplied by 3, which makes this 9 over 12. So what we just did is we went through this entire equation and made all of the numbers have a common denominator. So now that we have the denominator the same, we don't even need it. So all we need to do is 8x minus 48 equals 6x plus 9. And then you can solve from there. So clearing the fractions, all you're doing is getting the common denominator for each term. And then once the denominators are the same, we don't even need them. We can just get rid of them and just solve what we have from the numerators. Now, I would just want to mention that on all of these examples, it doesn't mean that you won't have a fraction or decimal as an answer. So if we were to solve this, we would want to subtract 6x from both sides, which would cancel that and leave 9. On this side, we would get 2x minus 48. So add 48 to both sides, and that would cancel, and we would get 2x equals 57. And then if we divide both sides by 2, then that would cancel there, and what we would end up with would be 57 over 2, which is not going to divide evenly. So we could leave it like that, or we could make it a mixed number. So 2 will go into 57 28 times with 1 left over. Or we could make it into a decimal, which would be 28.5. So if we were to solve, it doesn't mean that we won't get a fraction or decimal as an answer. We just didn't have any fractions or decimals while we were solving. So your answer can still be a fraction or a decimal. So hopefully you follow that. I know we did more decimal examples than fraction examples, but the fraction, all you need to do to clear the fraction is to get a common denominator. And then really we could even go through and completely eliminate our denominator. Even, let's just be fancy. We could even just go through and do this and completely take the denominator away, and then that would leave the equation that we need to solve. Good luck.